review the second supplementary estimates 2019-2020. As has happened in the past, this has been a bit of a challenge to be able to do the deliberations and generate a report and table the report to the Finance Committee of Parliament in one day. Well, it has been a bit challenging. So today, what we're going to do, I'm going to take the report. The members would have a report that I'd asked the Financial Secretary to give a report, which I have sent out to members. Our members are not seeing it.
They have it. It's in front of them.
Oh, I'm told that it is in front of you. Yes? You have it, members? What we're going to do is, in order to allow for the report to be generated in time and efficiently, what I'm going to ask members is that we will invite all the ministries led by the Ministry of Finance in. I'm going to have the Financial Secretary give her verbal report in which any changes, etc., will be on this report, which is in front of you. And then I'm going to take the report as it is. In other words, we're going to follow the sequence of the report. We're going to ask members to be succinct so that we have enough time. And as you can see, we will go through the various sections of the report so that the clerk, the consultant, etc., will be able to then insert the comments and recommendations in each section so that we can get the report out quickly. As you can see at page, which would be, I don't know if it's page 3 or 4, but you'll notice that there is a section that has the non-debt and the capital, and it has a list of ministries that have either seen an increase or reduction. I'm going to take those in order and deal with them specifically so that as I said, the inserts can be made in that order. With that said, members, next week will be a normal meeting on Wednesday where we will conclude with the Ministry of National Security. The following week, Wednesday next week is the 5th. The following week would be the 13th. My understanding is that Parliament will prorogue on the 12th. Therefore, we will not have a meeting on the 13th. I think the opening of Parliament.
No.
Sorry, do I have it wrong?
It was told prorogation.
I'm following. Yep, hold on. Prorogation is when?
I was told the 12th. Maybe I should double check it.
Well, we'll double check, but do members use the mic, please?
Isn't it that the official opening is supposed to be the 11th? I think that was what was said to us by the leader of government business.
Give me a minute. Let me check it, sir.
Yeah, the clerk says she will check. Just to say, yeah, what I have here, my understanding is that the 11th is a Tuesday, which would be, my understanding would be the final day of Parliament, and then the new session, the 13th, would be the throne speech, which is a Thursday. Now, unless they have changed those dates.
Chair, we would need to get the official from the leader,
Yes.
because he said one thing in the House, and so
right.
if we can just clarify it so that we can.
As the opening is usually on a Thursday.
It is usually.
Until
yes.
such time, let us, but the essence of the discussion is that we will not be meeting on the week of the 12th. Therefore, Friday would be the final. Sorry, next Wednesday the 5th would be the final sitting of the PAAC, and we will conclude with national security. Members, I don't know if there are any, I do believe we have one or two outstanding matters where we had asked some ministries, etc., to furnish additional reports, some business that was outstanding. I'm going to ask, with your permission, for the clerk to look through our reports, and anyone that has outstanding business, we will bring them next week Wednesday just to conclude the sitting, this year's sitting of the PAAC. All right, so members, with that, I would invite the Ministry of Finance and the other ministries in. If you could wake the orderly there first. Could open the door, please.
I'm waiting for them to answer, sir. I sent a message to the
Members, okay, we have checked with the clerk. The House will prorogate on the 11th,
Prorogue
on the 10th, which is the Monday, and the opening will be on the Tuesday, the 11th. So you are correct, and therefore, but it doesn't change the matter that there will be no meeting that week. So basically, next week Wednesday will be the final meeting of the PAC. All right. With that, members, let me welcome FS and Deputy FS to the House with the team. FS, as usual, I'm going to turn it over to you. What we're going to do, as I've indicated to the members, FS, is that we're going to allow you to give your report. We have circulated that to the members, and what we will do is follow the sequence of the report so that it will allow us to generate more quickly a report to Parliament this afternoon. So we'll follow the sequence and make comments and recommendations under the specific headings as you have put here. And I've asked the members to confine their questions to those areas. However, members, as indicated, what we're taking is the second supplementary and the report of that. The FS and Deputy FFs have indicated to me that not all the changes were put in her report. There are some other minor changes that would not be in the report. So if members feel the need to ask any questions on a wider basis on what exists in the supplementary, you're so entitled. So with that, FS, I turn it over to you to give your report. You can recognize and introduce the members of your team, and then as we go along with the various ministries present, as we take them further on, I'll let them do same.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. I have with me today several Deputy Financial Secretaries, Mrs. Loris Jarrett, Deputy Financial Secretary for Public Expenditure. I have Mr. Courtney Williams, Acting Deputy Financial Secretary for Technical Coordination, Deputy Financial Secretary Carleen O'Connor, and Acting Deputy Financial Secretary Diane Black. We also have a number of other team members, including the Transformation Implementation Unit Executive Director, Maria Thompson-Walters. The first supplementary estimates for fiscal year 1920, approved by the House of Parliament in October 2019, provided for total central government expenditure of $851.1 billion, comprised of non-debt expenditure of $533.4 billion and public debt service of $317.6 billion. The second supplementary estimates reflects a net increase in expenditure of $7.966 billion, or approximately 1% of the first supplementary level, resulting in total central government expenditure of $859 billion. This is comprised of non-debt expenditure of $541.4 and public debt service of $317.6 billion. So the increase is essentially on the non-debt expenditure. With respect to details of the second supplementary, we'll just start off with the performance for April to November. The fiscal year to end November 2019 recorded better than budgeted performances on both the central government's primary balance and fiscal balance indicators. Provisional data indicate that central government operations to end November 2019 generated a fiscal surplus of $11.4 billion, which is $16.9 billion better than the program deficit of $5.5 billion. The primary surplus of $94.1 billion is $14.2 billion, or 17.71% more than the $79.9 billion anticipated in the first supplementary estimates. This favorable fiscal performance resulted from a combination of higher than projected revenue and grants and lower than programmed expenditure. Revenue and grants were ahead of the first supplementary estimates by 4.8 billion or 1.2%, driven mainly by the strong performance of tax revenue, which was 5.1 billion better than the first supplementary budget. Capital revenue, which was forecast at 0.8 billion, exceeded projection by 0.013 billion, and grants, however, were behind the first supplementary by 3.6 billion, of 3.6 billion by 0.28 million. Non-tax revenue was broadly in line with the budget. The above-the-line expenditure at end November 2019 was $12.1 billion, or 3% lower than that projected in the first supplementary, due mainly to lower spending on recurrent activities. And recurrent activities would include programs, compensation of employees, and interest payments. Recurrent expenditure fell short of the revised budget by $6.6 billion. Contributing to this underspend were shortfalls in programs of $3.2 billion due to slower than programmed implementation of some activities. Spending on compensation of employees was $0.6 billion below the programmed amount, and interest savings of $2.8 billion. Interest savings of 2.8 or 3.3% primarily reflected lower than programmed payments on the external portfolio. The capital expenditure was lower by 5.4 billion or 14.1%, again reflecting slower than programmed implementation of projects. The projection to the end of the year. The current projection for 1920 revenue and grant inflow is $645.3 billion, representing an increase of 7.3 billion or 1.1% over the first supplementary. Tax revenue is the driving force behind this increase, which with an expected overperformance of $7.5 billion relative to the first supplementary. All tax categories, with the exception of international trade, are expected to contribute to the positive performance of tax revenue. Non-tax revenue is projected to be broadly in line with budget, while capital revenue is projected to end the fiscal year at 0.13 billion above the first supplementary. Grants are expected to be below the first supplementary projection. The fiscal year 1920 current projection for above-the-line expenditure is $645 billion, an increase of $7.97 billion over the first supplementary expenditure of $637.1 billion. The additional expenditure is facilitated by the higher revenue forecast and has factored in the targeted primary surplus of 6.5% of GDP. The fiscal balance under the proposed revenue and expenditure profile is $0.237 billion, down from $0.882 billion generated for the first supplementary. Capital spending as well as debt service remains unchanged compared to the first supplementary. Non-debt expenditure. Net increase in expenditure of $7.966 billion results after reallocation within the central government non-debt expenditure budget of fiscal space which will not be utilized within the current financial year. This reallocation includes approximately $2.2 billion within recurring programs, pensions, and $4.9 billion under capital. The committee is asked to note that the $2.2 billion reduction on pensions arises within the context of the programmed payment of all fully processed files by March 2020. The net increase of $7.966 billion brings total non-debt expenditure to $541.4 billion, up from $533.4 billion presented in the first supplementary estimates. The revised non-debt budget now comprises recurrent expenditure of $433.8, capital expenditure at $72.1, no change, and below the line expenditure of $35.5, also no change. The main areas which have benefited from the additional space are outlined, and these include under recurrent expenditure, the Ministry of Transport and Mining for $1.765 billion. Of this sum, $1.49 billion is to address outstanding PAYE and education tax arrears being carried by the JUTC and will be paid directly to to Tax Administration Jamaica. 0.209 billion is to supplement the operating budget of the Jamaica Civil Aviation Authority. The Ministry of Education, Youth and Information for 1.608 billion. Approximately 0.409 billion represents arrears in electricity payments owed by educational institutions. The remaining 1.2 billion represents an increase in GOJ's subvention of 0.6 billion each to UWI and UTEC. Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation, 1.598 billion, which will go towards maintenance of secondary roads and the flood cleanup. The Ministry of National Security, 1.709 billion, and this goes towards the Jamaica Defense Force, 0.748 billion, and the Police Department, 0.958 billion. Ministry of Finance and Public Service, 1.106 billion. The net increase in the ministry's budget includes 1 billion due to the National Housing Trust, representing payment which is reflected on the activity settlement of obligations to public bodies, and approximately 100 million for the payment of fleet buses for the government employees transportation system. Under capital expenditure, we have a total of 4.944 billion, which has been reallocated within the capital budget from projects which have exhibited lower than budgeted execution leading into the fourth quarter of the financial year to projects which have demonstrated the capacity to utilize additional resources. The Ministries of Economic Growth and Job Creation and local government have been the main beneficiaries of the reallocated resources. For the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation, 3.594 billion was reallocated to this ministry to address the major infrastructure development program, $1.7 billion, and this is for outstanding payments for land acquired in relation to the Ferris to McFeel and Constant Spring Road infrastructure works, and to NWC for NWC ancillary works in respect of the Mandela Highway, Constant Spring Road, and Hagley Park Road. Amounts are also going to the South Coast Highway infrastructure project, 1.3 billion for finalization of designs and the award of contracts for the commencement of civil roadworks before the end of the current financial year, and also for road rehabilitation project, 0.5453 billion. For the Ministry of Local Government, an amount of 1.077 billion has been reallocated for fixed asset acquisition for the Jamaica Fire Brigade project, along with the existing budget will enable Jamaica Fire Brigade to complete final payment on 2 pumpers, $60 million, to make a deposit on 8 pumper trucks programmed in the 1920 budget, and to also make a deposit on 20 additional pumper trucks to be delivered in 2021. On the below the line expenditure, $35.5 billion. This would have been carried originally. It is just being allocated now. It was carried in the contingencies. So the 35.5 billion is allocated for settlement of obligations, 13.044 billion. Just to point out that most of these obligations relate to the Petro-Carib Development Fund. So the amount to South Jamaica Power Company is amounts that the Petro-Carib Development Fund would have needed to pay. The loan to Petrojam as well, other loans and equity, and the loan to Development Bank of Jamaica. The Bank of Jamaica's losses and capitalization is also being covered, and this is for $22.475 billion. That is essentially the main things that are underneath the second supplementary.
Okay, just a few housekeeping points before we go into the meat of it. As indicated before, some of the increases, decreases, etc. were not reflected in the report. Just for the record, the Ministry of Local Government is here. Were they invited? Read the. Yes. They're here? Yes. Who is. All right. Nobody's jumping up, but all right. Oh, they're upstairs. All right. No, don't need them right now. But okay. The second thing, just for clarification, in the supplementary, you have page 17,001. Yes. You have an item 12513. It says here tourism international travel. That's right? No, it says additional requirement to meet operational expenses. So I'm just trying to figure out the international, how much were the approved estimates here? 509 million. And an additional 3 million are needed. Is that correct? And this is under which heading? In terms of what? Yes, you're saying by. No. That's. Yes. Okay.
So it relates to jump back.
Right.
And the $3 million is appropriation in aid, meaning that funds that they would have earned during the course of their business.
How would they?
Oh, I understand that these are funds that they would have gotten from TEF, before TEF became de-earmarked. And so they had these funds in their bank account. So in order for them to spend it, we have to bring it into the budget.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And in terms of the rehab maintenance repairs underneath, again, an additional 89 million.
This is TEF. This item relates to TEF, sir, and it's funds that they would have had in their bank accounts from prior years before they became the earmark. TEF. In TEF's,
So do
TEF's
they
bank
have
account.
so those bank accounts still remain current?
In TEFs.
Yeah. So what's the situation with the accounts? Are they all tight? Because how many years ago you had moved that to central, to the central,
I need to
to
do some.
consolidated fund?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I need to do some checks on this, right? Because really the accounts should have been transferred to the consolidated fund. So we need to just do some checks on whose account these would be in. It should not be TEF.
Yeah. All right. So, right, because these fall under the tourism support services, not the central admin. Because what may be useful as well is if we could get maybe not for this meeting, but if we could get we've had it in the past, a list of the internal travel by the Ministry of Tourism of the cost of overseas travel within the ministry itself. All right. Okay, and so you'll tidy this up. And I say it because it's nearly 3 years now that all funds were to be transferred to a central sorting. So if you're still bringing them on board, that's untidy. Okay. Are there any other clarifications, members? All right, so I'm going to, no, I meant anything that is not in the report that we are looking at, that you'd like to question before we get into the body of the report.
Well, I was a bit hesitant because I don't know if you want to, when you go to the ministry, individual ministry, national security.
Ministry of National Security will be here. So I'm just saying those issues can be dealt with in that. All right, so members, I'm going to move now to the first item of the first supplementary of the report, and indicate are there any questions in terms of the non-debt and the public debt servicing? The public debt service remains about the same. And so what has been affected mostly is the above the line expenses, right?
Yeah, it's the non-debt expenditures that have been affected.
That's what's been affected mostly by this. Good. All right, can we move then to the second item in the report, the secondary estimates? Okay, and now I move to section 3, which are the details of the second supplementary. Now, just as a matter of, just for simplicity, what we have is an increase of 7.966 billion in this supplementary. This increase comes about by virtue of two things. The collection of taxes was higher than anticipated by I'm trying to find, by how much? 7.3 billion. Right? And on the other side, we had a number of projects that were not able to be executed in the financial year for which the funds would be reallocated. How many of those projects were there? That generated a surplus of what, 500 and odd million?
All right, there's a 4.9 billion reallocation within the capital.
How much?
4.9 billion.
4.9 million. Hold
billion.
on. Billion, sorry.
And
all right. Hold on. 4.9 billion was
for the capital. And we have 2.2 under recurrent.
And 2.2 on the recurrent. Yeah?
Yes, reallocation.
So in other words, of the budget, and this is versus the first supplementary, not versus the
yes, from the first supplementary.
Not versus the original budget. Good. So the capital budget has been underspent by 4.9 billion.
the first supplementary budget. If
Of
we,
the first
if we left it,
supplementary.
yeah, if we left it alone, then we're expecting that 4.9 billion would not have been spent based on
Good,
the
exactly, so you're reallocating.
We're reallocating.
But you only have a week left, so, oh, well, no, you have till the end of March, yeah,
Little
a
more
little
than
more,
that.
but, and 2.2 from the recurrent.
from the recurrent.
All right, and in terms, so that gives you a total of 7.1.
Yeah.
Yeah? And your total is 7.966, so the increase, I'm
No.
just trying to,
No, the 7.9 is the net increase. So
Yes.
the reallocation washes out, and then the net increase on top of the first supplementary is 7.9. So we have both a reallocation and an actual additional increase.
Chair,
yeah, I'm just trying to,
Just, what would be the total reallocation under the capital?
4.9.
Between first and second supplementary. The original budget.
no, take it from the, let's get it from the recurrent, first supplementary, which is what we're increasing, that, and then we can take it. But let's
Okay,
try and
all right,
clear this up.
yeah.
I'm just trying to clear up that we are trying to reflect an increase of 7.966,
Yes.
roughly 8 billion. And I'm just trying to figure out how we got the 8 billion.
Right. So the ability to spend the 8 billion is primarily coming from the expected additional revenue
Of how much?
7.3. 7.3 billion. However, remember that our bottom line is the primary balance. So it is not just the 7.3 that you would look at, but what else has changed and how you meet that 6.5% of GDP. So there is a little
I
more
don't know if
room.
it's only me that's completely confused now, or it's
go
just
for
that
it.
my members are not willing to admit that they're not understanding. It simply, we have an additional sum of 8 billion. So I'm just trying to figure out where this 8 billion come from. It's some element of things that were not spent and some additional revenue. So just for simplicity.
Oh, member, if I could take a shot at that, just to put it within a context, we're working with a primary surplus of 6.5% of GDP. So that's the bottom line we're working with.
That you can spend in total.
Right. Regardless, I mean, the net result of the revenue and expenditure is that we are not to exceed the 6.5% of GDP. In terms of the 4.9 billion that the FS mentioned for capital, you're not having any net increase in capital spending. The capital remains at 72 billion because some projects have underspent, so you have that room to then put towards other projects that can utilize that space. So the 4.99 moving from some projects to some others within the capital envelope, so no increase in the capital. This,
All right, so hold on. Good point. So for virtue of this, I'm just trying to clarify it for the rest of us.
Okay.
So by virtue of this, the capital budget does not in essence change. All right.
That is correct.
So, and we come back to the reallocation, but what about the recurrent budget?
That's where we have the change, and that is coming from the increase in the revenue, the 7.3 billion increase in the revenue. That is that space
Yes.
that allows us to be able to increase
So-
the recurrent.
So wait a second. So there's a 7.3 billion additional in revenue plus 500 million that would not be, to get us up to the roughly 8 billion.
Okay.
That 500 million must be an underspend in the recurrent.
Not, all right, no, not necessarily.
Okay.
Because we use it at 6.5% of GDP, so you have a little space there where you can actually spend up to 500 million more without that 6.5% changing. I mean, it could become now a 6.4, 6.5, 6.49, it rounds off to 6.5. 6.504 rounds off to 6. any difference there can give you about a 500 million. So that's part of the difference.
So fundamentally then, the only major change in the budget has been the increase in revenues from taxes.
It's the increase in revenue that is actually allowing us to be able to increase.
All right, so that's number one.
Yeah.
Now, within that, so that's the actual funding of the budget. Within that, you have some reallocations. Now, in the capital budget, you said that roughly 5 billion has been moved from one set of projects to the other. The
Correct.
majority of that fall under where?
All right.
I think most of the shifts are on McJC,
Pardon?
on the Ministry of Economic Growth and
And the big
Operation.
projects in there.
yes.
So we would have that discussion, all of that, so they'd be able to explain roughly internally that 5 billion there.
Yes.
Okay? All right, members, is there anything else? Is everybody clear? Member Campbell?
FS, would you be able to explain the what hindrances you faced in because your report says that's on page 2 and the second paragraph, the last sentence there, which says due to slower than programmed implementation of some activities, what hindrances did you face in implementing these projects so that you'd end up with this 4.9?
Okay, so there would be different factors. One of the most frequent would be the procurement, would be the length of time that they take to procure.
And yours, what procurement period you're looking at?
Okay.
But what is your average procurement period within?
Right, so it would vary dependent on what the persons are doing, dependent on what it is that they're doing and what their plan was in terms of meeting a specific timeline.
Let me drill down a little further, because I'm concerned that we tend to use the whole procurement process to target what in our minds is the reduction of corruption. We try to, and not really geared at economic activity, because I just this morning I had a look at the various stages that we go through in procuring, in doing projects. And we are going through very often like 6 or 7 stages before we get to the point of attempting implementation. Would you say that the procurement process is in effect a hindrance to economic activity?
It is.
Okay, I would not say that, sir. Our procurement process is in line with the international standards. We are still doing some fine-tuning, but it is in line with the international standards. I think part of our problem is we potentially need some more training, which we have in fact been doing, but I think some of the procurement officers are in need of some more training. People need to be clear. You need to set out what it is you need to do. Plan it before some things get initiated before the full plan is in place. You need to put your timelines in before you can say or ask us to put something into the budget.
And this procurement regime that you have, how long has it been going?
Okay, so the government has had a procurement facility in place for decades. We did do a update of our procurement system about 2 years ago. It's still being implemented now. The new thing is still under implementation, but it has been in place for a while.
How long for the full implementation?
We're expecting to be fully there by next fiscal year.
And next fiscal year.
Yes.
Well, what I would say though, members, we will deal with this in more when we get to the ministry that has that had the significant project. So, rather than, I think, dealing with it in theory. Member Stuart? Yeah, it's Ministry of Economic Growth, so we'll take them later.
Thank you, Chairman. FS, looking at page 3, non-debt expenditure, could you explain to us in, say, layman's term, why there has been a 2.2 billion reduction in pension?
No, remember, we're taking it, I'm going through by section. We will come to that and deal with it in just for tidiness. We'll be there very quickly. All right. Okay, any other comments on section 3? But just for the record, I think where it says that we fell short by 6.6, it's in the recurrent. Is that correct? In the third to last paragraph of your report. Above the line expenditure at the end of November was 12 billion, or 3% lower than projected in the first supplement, due mainly to lower spending on recurrent activities, programs, compensation, and interest payments. Recurrent expenditure fell short of the revised budget, which was 3 months ago, by 6.6 billion. So is that 6.6 billion? That's not, is that the Ministry of Economic Growth, or is that across the board?
No, so that 6.6, we wouldn't be reallocating that 6.6. Some of the things will catch up, right?
But
So
where is that 6.6? Which is it? In other words, it's 6.6 billion in the recurrent budget, and you said that the underspend contributing to it is, as the member said, shortfalls in the programs of 3.2 billion in programs, and due to slower than program implementation of some activities. But what programs would those be?
All right, don't have the full details, but 2.8 of that is on the interest payments, and the other recurrent expenditure is 3.2 billion. On the interest, like the contributors there have to do with the exchange rate. The bulk of that was on the external side. And
hold on, just clarify that. That's an important point. It said recurrent expenditure fell short of the revised budget by 6.6 billion. What you say here is contributing to this underspend were shortfalls in programs of 3.2 billion. Shortfalls in programs. So which programs are you saying? That 3.2?
All right, so it would be varying programs across the government. It's primarily on the non-wage side.
Right, which is important. This is non-wage.
Right, so the bulk of this has to do with timing, and we are expecting most of this to be spent through the end of the year, with the exception of the 2.2 that we have reallocated.
No, but I'm still not understanding. Bear with me. You're saying that there's an underspend there's a shortfall in
Up-
programs
up
of
to end
3.2.
November.
So I'm just saying, between on, from the first supplementary to now.
No. Against the first supplementary
Right.
position, yes.
Right.
But not between the first supplementary and now.
Yeah, I got you. In terms of budget, because
Yeah.
some of these programs were not performing even before. But it's important for us to have an idea what these programs are,
Okay.
or where.
Okay.
Or,
All right, so we're not saying that the 3.2 that you're looking at here are things that will not happen.
No, but
Some-
if you, yeah, but hold on. If you're saying,
Some of it is just that it's a matter
you're
of
saying
timing.
above the line expenditure at the end of November was 12.1 billion. Lower than projected in the first supplementary. Right? Due mainly to lower spending on recurrent activities, programs, compensation, and interest payments. But you have here programs, compensation, and interest. You said recurrent expenditure fell short of the revised budget, 6.6 by 6.6. Contributing to this underspend were shortfall in the programs, because you have three of them here. Programs, compensation, interest payments.
Yes.
Programs is 3.2 billion,
Yes.
which were underspent. So what we're trying to find out are
Okay.
what programs are we
All
talking
right.
about?
All right. So some of this could also have to do with procurement. It has to do with the operating expenses.
You're not, I'm not asking why.
Chairman, can
Trying
I
to find out where. Is it that SDC didn't do a youth competition? Is it that, stuff wasn't, no, those are capital. I'm saying this is programs. These are programs of government which are put in place. I'm just trying to find out if there's any, because it's quite a bit of money. So it's
Chairman,
just-
can I just explain how we categorize the expenditure?
Yes.
So we have, on the recurrent side, we would have non-debt recurrent budget would include compensation and recurrent programs. Recurrent programs essentially cover the operating budgets of the ministries, all their overheads and
Yes.
the work that they spend providing goods and services. And so what we're saying here is that up to November, against what was budgeted to be spent over that period, they underspent by 3.2 billion, or 2.3% of what was budgeted. And this covers a range of activities, including procurement of goods and services, implementing activities on the recurrent side. Included in that 3.2 would be some contribution from the pensions, because we are seeing that pensions will not spend up to
That
two-
wouldn't fall under compensation of employees.
No.
If I can add though, Chair, to end December, we're only 1.2
Yes.
billion behind on the programs. At end December, we are 1.2 billion. So some of that shortfall has been eliminated.
So it's a
Okay.
timing
Timing.
issue on the recurrent side of the budget, timing, because you may have goods and services ordered, but you can't pay until the goods are delivered. So
Okay,
there could be a
okay,
gap between
okay.
when you had programmed for those to come in and when they actually came in, and you cannot pay out until the goods and services have been received.
So basically, it will be spent,
It
but
will
it is
be.
just being
Time.
spent slower than
Programmed.
projected.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Or you're not changing,
No.
this is
So
not
the,
being
so the
changed
overall figure
in-
doesn't change really, unless in the second supplementary you take away some of
No,
that
this
money.
is the second supplementary, so you're
No.
saying that this...
No,
Chairman.
Chair. No.
This is a
This is
report
from-
before the second
before the
supplementary.
second. So this is
Gotcha.
coming from the first supplementary
Right.
down
To November.
to
I'm
November.
agreeing.
Yes.
Yeah, but I'm saying now, in the second supplementary, you're not changing the figures that will be spent on the
Yes.
recurrent expenditure.
Yes, we are.
By how much?
We are 7.9 billion.
No, on the recurrent.
Recurrent. It is the recurrent expenditure that has an increase under the second supplementary.
Okay. All right. All right, members. Have you guys have gotten that?
Yeah, she's saying essentially that,
I'm just trying to clarify this because we do have to generate the report. And for those of us that are not economists, just want to ensure.
Yeah, she's saying basically approach.
But Chair,
All right. Just for clarity, this was a report up to the first supplementary. You're saying that by the second supplementary, now, you're expecting that to be rectified, spent, and additional funds will be put into the budget to be spent after. All right? Okay, so members, are we clear with that? All right. Okay. So, are there any more questions on section? I move now to the projected outturn of the financial year.
just a question on the compensation of employees. Well, even though there's 0.6 billion, but on the savings of 2.8 billion, lower than program payment on the external portfolio, what is the cause for that delay in payment?
All right, you're asking with respect to the debt?
Yes.
Yeah, we would have gotten some savings from the liability management transaction that was executed earlier in the year.
Okay, so then this would not have to be spent. So this is
Right.
savings, actual savings, because of that program.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
All right, so projected outturn. Can I move to the non-debt expenditure? Let me just read for you, just to repeat that, I think. So the net increase in expenditure of 7.9 billion resulted after reallocation within the central government non-debt expenditure budget of fiscal space which would not be utilized within the current fiscal year. So you're just tidying up now just till the end of March, basically, and try and get what can be done in this fiscal year. This reallocation includes approximately 2.2 billion within recurrent programs as pensions and 4.9 billion under capital budget, which is what we're talking about. It should be noted that the 2.2 reduction on pensions arises within the context of the programmed payment of all fully processed files by March 2020. I'm not certain that I fully understand that.
Okay, so we would have budgeted a certain amount for the pensions, to make the pensions payments, based on...
You're saying that it's, yeah, but you're saying that it's lower. Your payments are lower.
It's lower than what was budgeted, but it is lower, and we are, in fact, paying out everything that has been processed. So it will not, even if we were to leave it there, it just would not be spent because everything, the backlog has been removed. The only things we have currently outstanding are elements where the files are incomplete, and we are moving to get those completed, getting information coming in from the other ministries to complete those. But the processing of the pensions no longer has a backlog. So we have processed, we are going to be paying
what was
everything that has
budgeted
been
will
processed.
be spent, but you were
Below,
behind.
it will be below. Some of the things that might be impacting that, we would have had the SERP program last year. So you would have had some people coming out. I mean, we did our estimate for this year's budget, but a number of factors could have impacted it being lower than what we had
Some
estimated.
persons who took that
Would have taken the early
program probably would
retirement.
not get their payments in this budget year.
No, they got their payments. They got their payments. I'm just saying that if we were working with the regular retirement age, we would probably have had more coming, retiring now, but some persons actually took the early retirement.
Yeah, but if you would have done a calculation on the numbers that you expected to join the retirement
Yeah.
line.
We tried.
Then you
to
had
do
an
that.
additional program, which is an early retirement, which would probably add more to the pool than those
Not
that
this
you would
year.
have calculated.
Not this year. So the SERP was last year.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but we're talking about this financial year. Yeah. So, what is causing the below expenditure in the pension?
I would have to say that it would appear that the budget was overestimated.
It was overestimated.
Yes.
Okay.
Chairman, as it relates to that same issue there, I still have a lot of concern, especially from teachers who are saying that they have submitted the documentation and it's taken an unduly long time for these pension benefits to be processed. I don't know what can be done to expedite the process in this regard, because a lot of teachers and other public sector workers are suffering in terms of the length of time that they would have submitted their documentation.
Okay. So primarily, the reasons for persons waiting a considerable amount of time has to do with the documentation. The documentation comes from the various places where they have worked, whether ministry, department, school, etc. We at finance have been having to call repeatedly to these various institutions when we get something and it's not complete, all of the information is not there. We have to be calling them to try and get the full details. But once we get a file that is completed, has everything on there, it goes through fairly quickly. So it has to do with how well documents were kept over the years that persons have worked. We are moving to put something in place. I mean, some of these persons, we do give them a part payment while we try to resolve the matter. So it's not that no payment is made, but not the full payment.
Is our pension system still a paper-based system, or have we gone?
No, we have introduced what's called PEPAS. All right, something called PEPAS, which is used to process this,
So you're saying that
an electronic process
So
system,
what was causing the
processing
backlog
system.
then in the that you
Right.
mentioned?
Right, so it would have been manual before, but also
It would have been?
we're manual prior
Uh-huh.
to a couple of years ago. But also the fact that we are not getting the full documentation. So somebody worked for, let's say, 30 years. We might be missing 10
No.
years
The
of the
reason why I asked,
information.
because when we're talking about this current, you had mentioned that there was probably a backlog, but then you qualified it by saying that you suspect that there was an over budgeting. So I'm just trying to, which is it?
All right, over budgeting, from the perspective of we have been trying to resolve anything that's outstanding. We have not fully resolved the outstanding ones, but in terms of everything that has been fully processed and will be fully processed by March, we will be paying all of those.
So you still have a backlog that you are working on?
I wouldn't call it a backlog because we have been unable to complete the process.
Yeah, but these are persons who would have applied for their pension, but their
documentation
as you said,
is incomplete.
Incomplete file.
Yes.
You have a figure on or how many persons that is affecting?
Approximately 500.
500. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. With your permission, that matter raised by my colleagues is a very distressing one. FS, there are some public sector workers, specifically I know of some teachers, who have been caught between the early retirement option that being offered and the bottom line is that they are out of the service, out of the teaching service. They have not been paid any pension. Right? I know some of them going over a year now. And, you know, Chairman, it hurts. These are professionals who have been in the public service for as long as they have. The government made a proposal regarding early retirement. I've seen the letters from the Ministry of Education confirming that they are qualified to go off. They go off. They can't come back on the job and they're not receiving any pension. Therefore, there's no income whatsoever. And they have their day-to-day expenses to meet. Car payments, mortgage, children going to secondary institutions, universities. It's really hard. And I raise it, Mr. Chairman, because when I hear the FS answer and say 500 persons, 500 is a statistic, it's a data, it's a number. But that 500 is 500 families that are being affected every single day that the payments go not made. Every single day. And some of us members of parliament, we encounter them. They are not data. They are living people with real hardships. And this cannot be something to be addressed at some point. I raised it with the Deputy Financial Secretary a few months ago, and the matter remained outstanding. So while we are here, FS, it is something that must be resolved like today so that their distress can come to an end. It's not fair to them.
Okay, sir. To the best of our knowledge, there are only 2 teachers who have been impacted, and yes, they are being addressed. On the others, it's not that if the files are outstanding for long periods, and as I said, we do try to make part payments while we seek to resolve the matter. So it's not that these 500 just haven't gotten anything, but we are moving to resolve it.
Just finally, Mr. Chairman, why I raised it here, those group of persons are in a very awkward position. They can't withhold the service because they're on pension. They have no power whatsoever, and they just have to bear the circumstance that they are left in. That is what makes it very hard. They can't protest.
Just to point out, sir, when we process the files have to be signed off by the Auditor General. The Auditor General will not sign off on an incomplete file. And this is why we need to make efforts to complete the files or to come to a position where a full payment can be made. And that is what we're doing. We have made quite a bit of headway, in terms of resolving the whole pension issue, and I'm expecting that we will, in the near future, be current.
Just to add, I'm aware of the challenges that the Ministry of Finance face as it relates to the pension issue. And I'm also aware that most of the problems that you face is really as a result of how records are being kept at the various agencies and departments. But have you ever thought of giving some form of guidance to these agencies and departments in relation to how they, keep these records, so that seeing that the problem is falling back on you, then I think you should consider giving them some instruction as to how they keep these files and records, so that at the end of the period when they are ready, you don't find yourself in this kind of difficulty. Because I'm really aware of the fact that the major part of the problem is really the department and agencies. Yes.
Yes, sir. So we have moved to address the problem, the PEPA system that I indicated, and we also have my HR Plus in place, also an electronic system. So between those two systems, they are managing the current payroll and therefore all of your information and the pensions. So all of these ministries, departments, and agencies are all now utilizing the PEPA system. But there would still be certain people retiring now would have been in the institutions from time gone by, and therefore that is where we still do not have all of the information. But a system has been put in place.
Okay. All right, members. I'm now going to move to the recurrent expenditure. Before I start, those are the various ministries. There's something that concerns me a bit, and just FS in how we do the budget. I notice on the list of increase and decrease, etc., that the Ministry of Health remains static. No real increase there. Now, the reason I say this is that there is a real concern worldwide that we may be facing a worldwide epidemic with this coronavirus. And the extent to which we deal with the prevention of it is important, rather than just trying to treat it if and when it does come. Already I see social media buzz with discussions, and also that I think there's supposed to be a press conference by the Ministry of Health today. But I think it would be prudent of the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Health to, in some way, shape or form, put a substantial amount of funds in place really to deal with the prevention if it so happens. I know that over the last few weeks we have been trying to come to grips with the issue of dengue and the dengue cleanup, etc., etc. But that's one element of it, I think, in moving to the second phase. Also, there were some facilities put in place from when we were looking at the threat of Ebola. I think that those may have to be reactivated, reestablished, and I'm just wondering if in this second supplementary, if thought was given to that.
Okay, so the second supplementary actually provides for an additional $500 million to the Ministry of Health. It is, however, in relation to drugs.
Yeah,
of drugs.
but no, I saw that. But what I'm saying is that what you have here are increases based on sort of recurrent expenditure. There's no funds being allocated at this point to sort of prevention or treatment or how we will deal with it. Now, is it that you're going to wait? Or is there, is it a recommendation, members, that we must make to say that rather than miss the boat, let's jump ahead of the curve and hopefully ensure that, because if you determine you want to do more aggressive screening at your airports, there's going to be a cost associated with it. If you ensure you're going to want to have some areas of quarantine, there's going to be a cost. Do we not put those things in this supplementary budget now and have it there? If you don't use it and you want to reallocate it, fine. But you don't want a situation where you do find yourself in a problem and then you're scampering to find money at that point in time. So is it something that you would suggest that we recommend to Parliament today, that we deal with that?
Well, Chairman, for my part, no. I think we could end up with a situation where we're making provisions for contingencies for just about everything. We could be looking at what is going to happen if there's a hurricane or some unexpected weather system. Do we start making provisions for every conceivable item that we can think of? And in fact, in this particular case, when was this phenomenon coronavirus, it was about 2 weeks ago or so, or 3 weeks. We wouldn't have contemplated that, when this thing was put together.
Member Campbell, that's not the point I'm making. We know now that coronavirus is something that all countries in the world, please, let me finish. All countries in the world are looking at putting in place preventive measures. I'm simply saying that today in Parliament we're sitting down as members of Parliament determining what budget shall be approved till the end of the financial year. I believe, and maybe you may not agree, but I believe that it would be prudent of us to recommend to Parliament that funding be put in place to ensure that monies are available to take the necessary preventative measures. Not only that, but additional measures that if it does come, we have funding to deal with to put the necessary to deal with it properly. So I'm just saying, it is something you can reallocate if you want, but ensure you have it in place now.
Don't we, is it that our budgeting doesn't allow for any emergency?
Which was why I asked the FS how are we going to deal with it. So I'm just saying, my suggestion would be that we make the recommendation to Parliament. Now, FS?
Okay, sir. So we would have provided the Ministry of Health with what was requested. I cannot speak for the Ministry of Health. I would like to note, though, that given the previous dengue issue, there would already be measures in place.
Well, those measures that they're taking for dengue are slightly different, which is eradication of the Aedes aegypti. It's a mosquito base. This is a different and, dare I say, more dangerous situation we're dealing with. And therefore, I'm simply saying that there are certain preventive measures separate and apart. With dengue, you don't really have to look at your borders. You don't have to look at these things. And the treatment of it in quarantine situations is far more difficult and far more expensive. And I'm simply saying that as a recommendation that we should simply make a note to the Parliament and indicate quite strongly that we feel that rather than us falling behind in this, that we ensure that the necessary funding is in place to deal with it and deal with it early rather than waiting.
I support your view, Mr. Chairman, but I believe that we should have a discussion with the Ministry of Health before we,
Are you saying that we should invite them today before Parliament?
Well, right, the Minister is going to make a statement, so maybe we could, hear what he has to say. and then we...
But
everything
members,
here is...
just for the record, I
Yeah.
would like to formally just say to the committee that I believe it would be imprudent, maybe even reckless of us not to state to our colleagues in Parliament that it would be a recommendation of this committee that it be looked at by the Ministry of Finance. I believe that this budget should be part of the recurrent budget, it should be part of the Ministry of Health's budget in the second supplementary, because no matter what you say, you are going to have to take very strong preventive measures that are going to cost money.
No, I mean,
Can we invite the FS to tell us the processes which she has to follow in order to arrive at making a placement of $500 million? Let's say that is the figure, that she, the courses which she has to follow, and whether or not that can be accommodated for us to be able to pass what we are here to consider for it to pass. I'm not.
All right, so again, the Ministry of Health would need to indicate what it requires. So I think it is best that the Ministry of Health speaks to the matter.
All right, I think what the member is saying is a valid point, because we are here today. What I'm afraid of is that we let the moment pass and we find ourselves in a position where we are unable to take all the steps that we feel are necessary. What is your suggestion, FS? Is it something that we should, given where we're at, seek urgent counsel with the Ministry of Health? Is it something that can be dealt with after? How do we, because I intend to make a recommendation to Parliament on it.
All right, Chair, I think the Ministry of Health would need to be asked to say what is its position. Is it in a position to address the matter from its existing resources, or would it require additional resources? The Ministry of Health needs to indicate.
They have the ability to move around the resources within their ministry? As
The environment is still possible.
This says the FS with a certain smile.
With approval.
I think FS, I think maybe there's a little oversight here. I think maybe given all that's taking place, as I said, right now as we speak, the ministry is having a press conference. I suggest that after we finish the sitting, it would be late to invite them, and I don't want to hold up the process, that we could ask the ministry how they intend to deal with it. And I don't know, members, how we would take it from there, but quite frankly, I'm concerned that we let this pass. What I will do is have a word with the Minister of Finance before the sitting, but I will indicate that it is something that the committee has concerns about, if indeed we all have concerns. And I shall indicate that we feel it prudent to include something in this second supplementary as guided by the Ministry of Health, even if it is put as a provisional, however you want to deal with it. But I'm very concerned that we fall behind on this. Agreed? All right. With that said, can we move to the recurrent expenditure? And I start with the Ministry of Transport and Mining, 1.765 billion. Of this sum, 1.49 billion to address outstanding PAYE and education tax arrears being carried by JUTC and will be paid directly to tax administrations as an in-house, and 200 million net of appropriations in aid supplement the operating budget of the civil aviation support. So could you, could we get some clarity on what this, I know they're both here, but if you can start by just translating this into English. We can't. we can take it. Yeah. So, and then or do you want us to ask the agencies to jump in at this point? All right. So.
Yeah, the PS is here, sir. So.
All right. PS, Ministry of Transport and Mining, please indicate where. Hold up a hand somewhere. How are you, sir? Good to see you again. All right. Yes. You want to give us an idea of what, microphone please, what we are dealing with here? It seems, some of it seems to be housekeeping, but could you?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. The allocations for the JUTC and the Montego Bay Metro are to deal with additional requirements. And as I say, some are housekeeping. The allocation for the PAYE and the education tax are to deal with outstanding payments due by the JUTC that will go directly to the
tax
to the relevant tax administration. In terms of the Jamaica Civil Aviation Authority, there are contributions. Jamaica Civil Aviation Authority, operational expenses, additional operational expenses. Part of it is due to the fact that their budgeted allocation was significantly below what they had envisioned and planned, even beginning from last financial year. And so the supplementary allocation here is to ensure that they can carry out these activities. And if you want a more breakdown of what the activities involve, this JCAA representative is here, Director of Corporate Service and the Director of Finance.
All right, thank you. Let us jump in first to the JUTC. Member Phillips.
Chair, if you allow me, the statutory obligations to both the Montego Bay Metro and the JUTC, would this allocation bring them up to date, or this is taking care of back payments that were due from previous financial years?
In the case of JUTC, it would bring them up to November, but it's also a payment that would avoid the accumulation of penalties. And in the case of Montego Bay Metro, it would take them up to December.
To?
December of 2019.
All right, so go back to the JUTC. How much of this 1.49 billion that would be penalties?
None of this is penalty. What I'm saying, the payments are being made in a timely manner to avoid penalties.
No, you didn't say that a while ago. You said, I'm sure I heard that you said that some of this would be to deal with penalties. To avoid penalties. Okay, my apologies, sir. All right, so this would bring you up to November.
Right.
All right, and where the JUTC is concerned is the SCT, the on fuel, is that also up to date?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Just an observation, compared to the civil aviation, as you said, it was under budgeted from the start of the financial year, hence why an additional 880 million. Well, what I recognize it the same with JUTC, but I see nothing in the budget for the JUTC. Because I remember at the start of the financial year, where parts was concerned, there what was allocated for parts was below what was requested. How is the JUTC now managing with parts? Because I think it was 1.2 billion that was approved. How are we staying with parts now?
Yes, 1.2 billion was approved, and they have been spending and are up to date with those expenditure. I can allow Mr. Paul Abrams to explain a little bit more on that.
Welcome, Mr. Abrams.
Morning, everyone. We are up to date with our allocation for parts. We do have a balance of funding left before the end of the fiscal year.
Have a balance of?
We have a balance of funding left for parts, which should keep us adequately in operation, but there is a tight fiscal space for parts, so we have to be very prudent how we manage our parts.
And Chairman, let me why I'm emphasizing on the parts. If you're to look at the 1.2 billion dollars that was approved, I would suspect, because the JUTC pays duties also, so you're actually not getting 1.2 billion dollars in parts. You're actually probably getting about 75% of that, about $800 or $700 million actual parts. At the beginning of the financial year, you had about a run out of about 350 buses. Are we any better now, or are we still the same? It was projected with what you are getting with parts and refurbishing of buses, you would have been up to about 400. Are we anywhere near that, or are we still at the 350 or below?
Our budgeted availability is 385, and we are averaging almost 350, 360. With the refurbishing and some parts arriving in the next 2 weeks, actually, we should be back up to our 385 figure.
So that means your revenue intake is probably about 20 to 30% behind then?
It's about 18% behind.
18%?
Approximately 18%
behind last financial year?
What was projected?
Sorry?
What was projected?
Of what was projected?
Yes.
Well, so if you're 18% behind what was projected, so you're probably about 30% behind last financial year then, because you were projecting ahead of the last financial year. Why, Mr. Abrams, why are you going down into the numbers like that? Because I am concerned, and I'm sure members in here are concerned, and the Ministry of Finance, because the subvention from central government to JUTC had increased over the last financial year, and the situation at the JUTC isn't getting any better at all. And taxpayers' money, I mean, it is spending over probably about, $6 billion this year as subvention to the JUTC, inclusive $5 billion plus this 1.5, which is statutories. You're talking probably about $6 billion, but then your losses is increasing by about 30 to 40% each year. You know, and I keep asking the question, what is the government's interest? I know you can't, but maybe the permanent secretary can answer. Is it a state that we're looking at winding down the JUTC, or are we just going to allow it to just crash?
The increased subvention has helped significantly, but the JUTC has also been implementing several measures to improve efficiency and to reduce operational costs. Those include the fuel system, the lubricating system that was introduced at significant cost but is already showing its benefits, and it has also embarked on some initiatives that are resulting in in improvement in performance. One such is the use of the CNG fueled buses, which have been in operation now for about 4 or 5 months out of the 6 months of pilot, and that is also showing good promises in terms of efficiency. The JUTC has also introduced measures to improve the revenue collection. Really, Mr. Abrams should be talking about these things, but improve revenue collection and to reduce leakage of the revenue. So although the ridership has gone down, they have managed to hold very well to the budget that they have been allocated. And during the course of the financial year, they have also significantly reduced the exposure in terms of aged debt to creditors. So
yeah, but Mr. Pierce, believe me, that is a whole heap of mumble jumble that I keep hearing since I've been sitting inside of this committee. Yeah? Because you're still taking an increase every financial year for the last umpteenth years of taxpayers' money. You have an aging fleet. Right? We have not added any new buses over the last 3 years to the JUTC. So, I mean, yes, it's a step in the right direction, but it is not telling me how it is that we're going to be cauterizing what is happening at the JUTC. You're spending over $6 billion in grants from central government, taxpayers' money to the JUTC, and you're reducing in ridership. You're not increasing. When you start increasing, then I will say we're moving in the right direction. Mr. Abrams, what is the average age of your fleet that you have right now?
The average age is about approximately 8 years.
8 years. There cannot be any efficiency of those buses. Cannot be.
We do require new buses for our fleet.
How many new buses would you need to your fleet to be able to increase ridership?
We would probably require about immediate injection of 50 units. That would allow us to remove some of the older units off peak and bring them back during the peak process.
And what would it require to maintain the fleet that you have now in parts? Cost?
Well, the older the units become, the more they will cost to operate, and I think we have to be very clear on the operation of a public passenger unit. It stays out on the road for 16, 17 hours a day. Bearing in mind, the older it gets, is the more it's going to cost to maintain.
I remember at such meeting like this, you had said you needed at least $3 billion annually to maintain the fleet that you currently have. You requested about 1.7, but you got 1.2, so you're way below what is actually needed.
Our request for parts, I believe, is at 2.1 this year for the 2021 year.
For the
2.1
for the upcoming financial year.
Yes, for 2021.
All right. Well, we'll see what will come. Thank you, Chair.
Member Clark.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Whilst I will agree with my colleague on some of the points that he has raised, and I was listening to see if I would hear it from the Permanent Secretary, from Mr. Abrams, is it the fact that the service that JUTC and Metro Mobile provides is very, very essential. They might not be making a profit per se. The fleet might be old and need to be replaced. But the fact is, Mr. Chairman, there's a large percent of Jamaicans that does not or do not own a motor vehicle of their own and depends heavily on this service. And therefore, whilst I will agree that we need to take time and strategically to pull out old ones and to put in new ones, we still have to maintain it. And the cost is something that is not going to be profitable at a point, but it is a service. Every country, Mr. Chairman, provides a bus service that it is not always profitable to the country, but it is necessary. And we have to pay attention to that.
Mr. Chairman, I heard the exchange between my colleague from Northwest Manchester and Mr. Abrams. You know, the budgetary allocation and the expenditure has one primary goal in mind, and that is to provide effective service to the public in an efficient and economical way. I have one little simple concern based on reports that I have had. Many of the buses which JUTC are operating are simple little things like cleaning of the buses is in dire need. Many of the buses, the passengers go on them, they can't sit on the seats because they are dirty, they are not clean. I get reports from the depot, particularly the one in Portmore, that there are workers and staff, but they are not doing any work cleaning the buses. They are told that they were sent there for a job, not to clean buses. Many of the buses on the road, I am told by commuters, are leaking. So while the engines are running, that they can move from point A to point B, the condition of the buses that the commuting public is subject to and for which monies are being spent is wanting. So I want Mr. Abrams to tell us that for what is being allocated in the budget, can he speak to the quality of the service, even though it is limited? What quality service is being provided to the commuting public?
Before we go, Mr. Abrams.
My friend, there's an allocation. Just to correct my friend, what I see here is an allocation which is a direct payment to TAJ.
Yeah.
So I'm not
Mr.
sure.
Abrams, how many passengers do you transport a year?
We should be lifting possibly about 45 million.
Okay. Yeah, Member Campbell, yeah, you're...
Just some housekeeping. We have, at best, another
hour. And do you foresee with us taking these circuitous routes that we'll be able to accomplish what we set out to do within that time?
Yeah.
Where else?
All right, Mr. Abrams, there's a...
I can't agree with
Member Jackson.
the gentleman that says that our buses are all dirty.
Oh, no, I think you have carried it a little far. I think he was saying that there were some complaints of it. I don't think anybody would say that.
We have a 350 bus fleet, a 375 bus fleet, and yes, I will agree that maybe one or two may slip out of the cleaning process, but overall, our buses are cleaned, our buses are maintained, and we do work within the fiscal space for maintenance. With respect to persons coming there for a job, I can't answer that question because we employ staff to work at the JUTC, not to come for a job. So, and we don't have issues of that complaints at all.
Mr. Chairman, I'll just ask Mr. Abrams, do some due diligence on that. You at the top may not very well know what is transpiring down there. So I make my comments based on information from persons on the ground. I do my own inquiries. The depot is in my constituency, and I take it a duty of mine to follow up on what happens in the public institutions. I speak from that information. not one, not two persons. So I just invite you to make some check on the Portmore depot and the level of depot management taking place in respect to the preparation of the buses before they are dispatched.
Noted, sir.
No? You're finished? Mr. Members, I have a concern, and I don't think it's a new concern. Every time we've had a supplementary budget, I think the two people that we can rely on to visit us almost every time is Mr. Hunter and Mr. Abrams. One no, I thought we should put a special seat for them. But Mr. Abrams, why I have a concern is this. Mr. Campbell made the point about this being housekeeping. You can look at it as housekeeping because it's going from the Ministry of Finance back to taxation. However, it is an additional revenue. In other words, expenditure, sorry. When we started this year, we started with one budget. What was the original budget for the financial year, Mr. Abrams? Your original. And the estimates of expenditure.
I can't tell you that at this present right now. I could.
I'm sure your financial person.
Yeah, we're checking it right now.
5.19 billion.
No, the 5.193 would be, was that the approved estimate or was that the first, after the first supplementary? I think this was the improved plus whatever we got in the supplementary. Or not?
No, they didn't get anything in the first
supplementary. Okay. Now, so what we have is a budget here of 5.193, call it 5 billion, and an additional 1.5 billion. Now, whether it is to pay, it is expenses that are earned, taxes, etc. So the budget now has gone to 6.749, call it 6.75 billion. Now, quite frankly, that is more than we spend in the Ministry of Justice. It's more than we spend in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And we understand how important public transportation is. However, there has been this argument of efficiency. You have persons who drive taxis, they drive their own buses on routes. They are limited by what they can charge because there is a JUTC in place. The JUTC on top of that has the prime routes. It has certain routes that others can't operate on. And yet, every year we come back with this budget that is a massive budget, and we just don't seem to be able to contain it. And a little back of the envelope, you say that you move about 45, no, I took it at the high end, 45 billion persons a year, and your budget is 5.815 billion. It's a subsidy of $145 per passenger. No, I mean, I don't know, that's a lot of money per passenger. The efficiencies must be bad. And I think, members, there comes a point where I think that there needs to be a sort of performance audit of JUTC to determine how we go forward, because it's not a matter, I mean, you always hear about, yes, we have to put up the price, etc., but I don't think that can be it, because there are persons who are giving the same service at almost the same cost, and they're able to manage and make a profit, yet we are running a deficit on every trip. And I may be wrong, but I think that the time has come for us to seek that sort of audit to determine why it is that we're having this difficulty. I don't know, Mr. Abrams, if I'm far off, maybe my numbers are wrong. I'm sure you have done some of these numbers, and you would have an idea of what the subsidies per person. Maybe you can give us some clarity.
Well, I think you should start by saying that public transportation is a social good. And if you look across the world, the cost recovery of virtually every public transportation system is within its 30%. It's heavily subsidized by all governments. We are no different. We try to work within our fiscal space, and the challenges we have, we deal with them on a daily basis. So I don't think the JUTC is that much of a disaster. It still operates its 375 buses every day. It still moves at hundreds of thousands of persons every day. And we are an essential service. And just the other day when they had that issue where the company withdrew its service, the issues that were developed on the road shows you the importance of what the JUTC means to the commuter. And I think it's clearly understood that, you know, as an essential service, yes, improvements need to be made and efficiencies need to be tightened up. But overall, I don't think the JUTC is that much of a disaster that sounds like here at this present point.
Mr. Abrams, you know, I don't think our issue is with the task that yourself and your team have been given, because you've basically been given a basket to carry water. You have not gotten any new buses since the last 30 buses, the Chinese buses. You have an aging fleet. You have a reduced budget for parts. You're carrying less passengers. Your fare box is reducing year after year. And nobody's discounting about the social good that the JUTC performs. And what we're saying is that we want to see from the other side that what is required to make JUTC more efficient, that you're given the tools to make it efficient. So we're not discounting that you're carrying passengers. Your minister stood up in here and said he needs 480 buses to be rolling out. You have passengers waiting for an hour more in Portmore. You have buses leaving Portmore and going to downtown, and before it reaches downtown, it have to come back on a wrecker. That is not about giving good service to customers. We want to ensure that when your buses go out, that they're not breaking down or a fuel cable burst or a brake cable burst that put you in jeopardy of carrying the public. Our thing is that if you're going to give you a basket, at least help you plug some of the holes. And we're not seeing that as a policy decision from the government. That is the issue that we're talking about. You have been trying, and I know that yourself and the team have been trying, despite all some of the deficiencies that you have. But when you look at Montego Bay Metro, it's probably about a quarter of the buses that is required is running. You should have had a fleet of 450. You are down to 350. Look, so, you know, what we want to ensure is that the adequate budget allocation is given to the JUTC, that it is not costing the taxpayers more and more. We accept it. We'll never make a profit. But we can't be asking the taxpayers every year, financial year, to fork out an additional $1 billion or $2 billion to subsidize
when my people in the country not even getting a subsidy to leave from Balaclava to Mandeville or Mile Gully to Mandeville. But we are subsidizing those in the KMTR and in Montego Bay to the tune of nearly $7 billion. That is what we're talking about. So I want to hear from when the Minister of Transport or the Minister of Finance come in the next financial year, that $2 billion that you asked for parts and how many new rolling stock he will give you. That is what I want to hear.
You will hear it, but it won't happen.
Two things, Mr. Abrams. I've heard it twice. Fare box reducing. I don't understand. You can give us some clarity on that?
You reducing in fare box?
Yeah.
Or fare box reduction?
Yes. What?
Well, fare box reduction goes hand in hand with passenger lift. If you can't roll out the adequate amount of buses, then your fare box would be low.
So you're saying you're earning less.
Your load factor would rise, but your revenue base would not rise according if you had 400 buses. So that's the fare box issue that we have. Less buses we roll out is the less fare that we can collect.
So how much less buses do you have now? What is the situation now?
About probably 20% of our fleet, which we calculate about 40 buses, 45 buses in that region.
You're saying you're short?
Yes, we're short about 45 buses.
So what do you do to you have that shortage? What do you do to fulfill the routes that would be underserved because of this?
We have a franchise system that we have franchisees that operate alongside us on those routes. But do
those franchisees charge the same, more, less? What do they charge?
They would charge this within the same fare structure as we have, but we can't really say or hold them to a exact figure that they should charge like what the JUTC's fare box charges.
So why do you think it is that those franchisees are able to buy a bus, operate the bus, charge the same fare as you, and make a profit because it's a private business, and yet we, despite everything, have to subsidize every passenger that goes on our system?
I don't think you can compare apples and apples there, because somebody owning a highest van or a coaster bus is a totally different operation to a public transportation system that has guidelines to follow and regulations.
And I will also say that you would have to have a regular schedule despite the whether they're heavy loads or not, whereas the franchisee probably only move when him get a good bus. So there are issues, but I'm just saying the amount that it is costing us per year, really, and it doesn't seem that we have a handle on it. And members, I'm suggesting that the time has come. I think there needs to be some sort of external efficiency audit of JUTC, just on behalf of the people, to determine if there's some way or what the efficiencies are that can be put in place. Despite whatever may happen, it is an important thing that must be done at all, right? Yes, please.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, at the risk of uttering some more mumble jumble, let me point out that the minister is actually in discussion with the finance minister for the provision of 50 additional buses. We have made the submission to PIMSEC, and that is under active consideration.
Yeah, but But Pierce, let me just say this. I welcome that thought. I welcome it, and I see some members here.
Proposal, Chairman, or is that
At
accepted?
the same time, I'm simply saying that this is not the first that we will get new buses. We have had issues. This thing is not something that started today. It's going back a long way. And I'm just saying that, quite frankly, there must be efficiencies, and I believe that an external audit, looking at the operations, making some recommendations, must be something that needs to be considered at this time. Okay? All right, members, I move on from JUTC, civil aviation.
The additional 880 million for civil aviation, is this for a particular program? Because I see here grants, contribution, and subsidies, 208 million. Is this for a particular program?
Yes, I'll just allow civil aviation to respond.
Confirmed now.
So the additional 880 that we are asking for consists of the two major capital projects, which is the DVOR and the AIM project that we are pursuing, as well as operational expenses.
No, I didn't hear the second major project.
The AIM, which is Aeronautical Information Management.
Management system.
Yes.
Okay, so, all right, thank you.
All right, members, if there's no further information, I'd like to allow the Ministry of Transport. They're always welcome to stay, but if they would like to go. All right. Members, I want to move now to the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information. Education. All right. All right, so Ministry of Education is here? Yes, I understand the PS was called away. Okay. The 1.6 billion, you have here that 400 million are electricity bills, and the 1.2 billion are increases in GOJ subvention of 600 million each to the University of the West Indies and 600 to UTEC. Am I correct?
Chairman.
Could you, I'm just interested, UA and UTEC, is it just a general subvention or is it some specific?
It's not a general subvention, Mr. Minister.
For UTech, Mr. Chairman, sorry. For UTech, they had an increase in their salary, which has increased the operations to the student, to the school, and so they were offered 600 million additional in this estimate, supplementary.
And UE?
And UE, they also have some challenges in terms of their operations, extreme challenges. So they were given an additional 600 million.
And not that we are against it, but this is based on what? Just a discussion. How do you, in other words, we have had them a couple times. We're having discussions. Our discussion here, we were concerned because of issues to deal with the students and the delisting, etc., etc., etc. And there was a long discussion with UE in particular because we were a little concerned that while operating as a regional institution with its sort of autonomy, we were doing our subventions, but that there were supposed to be meetings, and if memory serves me correctly, the minister was supposed to meet like once a year. But I'm still unclear about how this happens, how these increases come about, just for clarity.
Well, the overall cost of running the operation has increased significantly. And based on a submission we received from the university, sometime, I think it was around September, October, they had approximately $4 billion outstanding in debt. Yes, $4.2 billion outstanding.
This is which one?
University of the West Indies.
Okay.
Right. And so over the period they have been trying.
Is this UE in all or UE Mona campus? That's a lot of money.
Yes, it is. For the university center, I have here, there was an outstanding amount of $354 million. For the shortfall to the UWI Center, there is a $1 billion.
What's that? I'm not quite certain. A shortfall to the university center?
Right, based on the subvention that is approved in the budget. As you know, the UWI is a group, the regional, so you have the centers and the various regional universities. So in total, it was $4.2 billion. We had made a submission to Cabinet to see what could happen, but it was not supported at that time. But they could reach out to us again in December, really in a crisis. And based on that, we had made submission again to the Ministry of Finance. And so they were given this 600. That's what could be afforded.
I remember Stuart, I remember Phillips.
Thank you, Chairman. I have two questions for the FS here. We had some severe challenges at UTech during that first semester leading up to the examination period for our students. Are you now saying, FS, that that situation has been settled, where we will never have our teachers again going on strike? And there was an aggressive program as it relates to equipping our schools with solar panel to really reduce the expenses to JPS, real electricity. Where are we with that program? Have we abandoned it? Are we pursuing it as aggressively as we once were?
I'm assuming that was directed to the PS.
Okay. In terms of the solar panels, That is being done for the high schools, and it is still in progress.
Have you seen any reduction?
Well,
Has it worked?
there are...
I think they're just trying to get an update. It was a program
Yes.
that was put in place so that we wouldn't have this level of bill coming at us. So I'm just saying that.
Some schools have identified some savings, yes. Those that are on the system. We
All
could
right,
get that information.
Yes,
to
I
you.
think that's a better route to go. Maybe you could just give us a report on the electricity savings program on the Ministry of Education. Yeah. Roll out of the program and how effective it has been.
Okay.
Use your mic, please.
That question relating to UTEC, where they had the challenges in December, I think, November, December. Has it been settled? We really have a recurrence again?
Could you repeat the first part of the question?
I was asking whether or not the amount of money allocated here to UTEC would have settled the outstanding issues that the teachers, the lecturers, they experience in December.
Well, if you recall, in the first supplementary, UTEC was given $1 billion. And in the second supplementary, there's an additional $600 million. And therefore, in 2021, there should be the repeat of the $1 billion which was allocated in the first supplementary should be able to cover the arrears.
Sorry, the Ministry of Finances will actually be providing a schedule to UTEC on how we address their remaining outstanding amounts.
All right, any other questions on education?
I just wanted to ask, what is the total subvention for the University of the West Indies for this financial year? And do we, as a country, have any outstanding amounts to the University of the West Indies?
No, the PS, acting.
The total amount to the University of the West Indies, which if the $600 million is approved, will be $8.2 billion.
8.2 billion.
Right.
And to the UTEC?
For UTEC, it's 1.8, 2.8, and with this 600 million, if approved, will be 3.4 billion.
3.4 billion, and so 8.2 to University of the West Indies, 3.4 to UTEC. Any outstanding amounts owed to the University of the West Indies, country amounts?
I think at the moment there is 124 million.
124. This is outside of what the subsidy that you're giving them now? 600 million?
Well, that
or this has nothing to do with that?
Well, it is included in the 600 million, remember. So overall, we would have cleared the 124.
So you would have cleared the 124.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Member Jackson?
I'm a little bit relieved, Chairman. I see there's no subvention here for CMU.
Why are you relieved?
No. I think that some savings are being realized now. No, I was just curious on making that inquiry.
Good observation.
Because, no, with all seriousness, based on reports that we have gotten at the PAC before, You have buildings there that are under construction and transactions which have been made. No, we are looking at the allocation, the funding for the different universities. I only wish to share my observation, Chairman.
Yes, no.
And my gratitude that there is no additional request for CMU in this financial year.
Okay. All right, members, if there are no further questions to the Ministry of Education, I'd like to excuse them, if they may. Yeah.
No, regulations committee is supposed to be meeting. Regulations supposed to be meeting now.
Yeah, but we have to finish, or there's no parliament.
I'm just telling you.
Yeah, we're not getting myself. All right. Members, I'm going to move now to the Ministry of National Security. The So this is the increase here. So this is military. No, I'm going to. All right. Members, I'd like to suggest the Ministry of National Security is not something that we normally discuss in great detail. What I would like to suggest, if I'm just looking at 2600, what we have here is that there's an increase of 1.7 billion, 748 million to JDF, and 958 million to the police. My understanding is that there's no capital, that this is really expenses compensation. So I think we can clarify that get an idea of that, and then I will relieve them. I don't think if there's further discussion, we could ask the required committee to invite them back and take it in camera.
Mindful of that, the two areas that I have interest, one in the recurrent and one in the capital. And of course, the matters that we defer for in camera are the sensitive issues. Now, I just like to ask, as you said, clarification.
Let me just, all right, so let us start with JDF.
Yes.
Representatives from JDF are here. Welcome. Could you identify yourself for the...
Good afternoon, sir. I'm Colonel Murphy Price. I'm the Colonel Adjutant Quartermaster responsible for matters of human resource management and finance and logistics, sir. With me is Colonel Tony Gregory. He's the Deputy in charge of finance matters.
Excellent. Okay. All right. So there's an increase of 750 million. This is operations expenses. It says here, just generally speaking, could you just
These are not operations, sir.
Pardon?
These are not operations.
Oh, sorry.
These are compensation.
Compensation?
Yes, sir.
All right. So it's a straight compensation for JDF?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, members, are there any other?
On that item, on page 2601, item 1005, there's an additional expenditure of 448 million. And it says here increase recruitment. Is that recruitment to the regular JDF or is it otherwise, such as the Jamaica Service Corps?
Sir, I'm not seeing precisely the figure that you are referring to, sir.
I think the increased recruitment he's talking about would be the 372.
Yeah.
372.
372.
Yes, sir. The increased recruitment is as part of the Jamaica National Service Corps. I believe you're familiar with the program, yes, sir. It is we have moved the program from the initial stage of 250 per quarter to 500 to 600 to 750 now, sir.
So you're at 750 per quarter?
Per intake, yes, sir.
Starting with?
The last intake, which commenced in November, sir.
November, okay. But at the beginning of the financial year, you did plan for 250?
We had planned to go up to 500. But
per quarter?
Per quarter, yes, sir. Yeah. We started at 250 before. We had planned to move to 500. Once we got to the 500 figure, sir, we were directed, because of national strategic direction, to proceed to a 750 figure, sir.
Of those that you recruit, my understanding at the beginning of the 250 per quarter, some would go as recruitees into the regular JDF, some into some of the other uniform groups,
yes, sir,
such as the correctional services, the fire brigade, and also the police, and others go into the private sector.
Yes, sir.
What has been the take-up for those that you have trained for both the uniform groups and the private sector?
Madam PS is here, and I'm not sure if she wants to speak on that. However,
let me.
Should I yield?
The PS is
but
here.
I can.
Mr. Jackson, let me just clarify. I would like to, while there are two different issues, one has to do with the JDF and its operations, and that's one set. This has to do with sort of the youth training program,
yes,
which is not really JDF National Security Operations. However, out of an abundance of caution, I would just like to ask the PS if she's comfortable. I just want to ensure that out of an abundance of caution, that PS, this is not an issue that infringes on national security in its broader sense.
Yes, sir, it is. We don't want to discuss.
Context? In what context?
Well, we prefer to have these discussions in the camera.
Fine, fine.
When you're discussing the JDF matters.
No problem. And I was saying to you, I'm making a distinction between JDF matters and JDF with regards to the program that's being discussed here, which is could you give me an idea though, this is a program that was laid out and as a youth training program, am I correct?
Are you speaking about the National Service Corps?
Yes.
Right. Uh-huh.
Could you just say what it is? I mean, just, are you feel that? I thought this was something that was also announced publicly. What, you would like to take the discussion in camera?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Miss Service, this is not a sensitive security matter. This is a youth training program that the JCF is administering. It has nothing to do.
No, it's not, sir. It is the part of the whole recruitment process of the JDF.
What percentage of these go into the JDF?
In camera, sir.
Well,
if I may, Madam PS, the uptake into the security forces, I think, is what Madam PS is requesting be done in camera. However, the essence of the program, I'm able to articulate the nature of what the JNSC program is, sir, publicly.
Well, I would want, I don't want us to cross boundaries. Yes, you remain adamant. You feel that the program in general should not. No, I'm just seeking clarity. I would like a
She's
point.
not. You're a spokesperson.
And you're not.
Yes, yes. Your position remains.
Well, there are some intricacies about the whole training program and the areas where trainees are allocated to different areas of the security. I don't really want us to. I don't think we should.
All right.
We do this
Mr.
all the
Chairman,
time that we're sitting here.
The Prime Minister speaks about this program openly.
The Prime Minister.
I am not asking. I am not asking about the intake and what they do in the JCF. I'm not asking that. I had simply asked Colonel Murphy Price earlier on of the total enlistment. First it was 250, went up to 500, and now 750. What is the proportion of those that go into the uniform groups as against that goes in the public? That has nothing to do with the sensitivity of their activity and to compromise any security issues. And as I said, these are things that the Prime Minister himself speaks about as the minister in charge.
You're merely a shadow minister.
Members, given the comments of the Permanent Secretary, out of an abundance of caution, what I would do is ask the members of the security forces to remain. We will finish off the rest and whatever necessary. If needs be, we'll just ask if it is even a committee of. Member Clark, as I said, we have to finish this exercise to be able to, to be able to report to Parliament. I indicated to the Minister of Finance that this was difficult. He asked us, and normally we meet on a Wednesday, and we got here today, and
traffic between China and Jamaica, which is usual at this time because of the holiday period, as well as the concerns that have been expressed within China by the authorities in terms of restriction of movement. We need to also do what is necessary based on our own risk assessment, and we think coming in from China now should be avoided, and going into China should be avoided. I want to make it clear too, because Jamaica is a country that is very international in its openness, tourism industry very vibrant, that Jamaica is open for business. We're not suggesting at all that others should adhere to a restriction from visiting Jamaica. In fact, Jamaicans and our foreigners continue to enjoy all the pleasures and privileges that they're entitled to once they visit. But as it relates to the challenges in China, those restrictions are specific to that. I think that's important. Well, this is the first time I'm announcing it. I will do so in Parliament and the appropriate, and this is in having advised the Chinese ambassador, having had a discussion with him this morning. Yeah. Right. Well, I'm being told that I should say strongly advised. Right. So that is why I indicated that we are going to be having discussions with our bilateral partners, our major bilateral partners. In fact, that meeting will take place shortly after this one. And you know the main ones, right? European Union, Canada, the US.
From PBCJ, we just had a really historic launch with the cruise ships coming into Port Royal. I wanted to know what plans do we have in place for all the ports of entry that are not necessarily coming into the airports?
Well, as I said earlier, we have to distinguish between our normal course of activity, including the tourism travel, from what we have announced as it relates to China, traveling to or from China. We will continue to be vigilant, and indeed will step up the pace of our vigilance at our ports of entry, which would include our ports, and that is an ongoing process. Our medical team on the front line would have been briefed and will be kept brief based on the information that we get. But beyond that, we are not in any way, shape, or form advising of any restrictions or travel advisory as it relates to other jurisdictions. But we will continue to coordinate, as I said earlier.
And I also wonder, what about other persons who have come into the island from China in the last
Right. I missed saying that, and I'm happy you asked that question.
Yes, sir.
For persons who have returned from China within the last month, the ministry has begun a process, and I believe we could use this mechanism to provide some support for that process, to track where we can those individuals, and we would ask those individuals, if they are not contacted, to make themselves available either to their private physician or the public health system, because one of the other things that we would like to do is to do an assessment of those persons who have recently come into the island from China, either via third country, because they have to go via third country. And we're thinking about the last month. Any other questions?
Just a clarification. You said samples will have to be sent overseas for testing for the coronavirus. So, what criteria did you use to rule out this particular case?
Bruce, that's your.
So, I don't know. Discuss the case definition. So, as I said before, there is a case definition for the coronavirus. So it's not every illness that you see in hospital that you're going to say, could this be? You have to compare the patient to the case definition, and we have our experts here, Professor Boyne, Dr. Azinger from the lab, Dr. Alison Nicholson, and our CEO. We met this morning, and we looked at the case definition again, and we would compare what a patient has with that case definition, and this patient falls outside of that case definition.
That's it? Are you adequately addressed? Huh? Okay. You must understand that this was not a planned press briefing, so I'm consulting as I go along because I want to be responsive and not be accused of ignoring the calls of the media. No, I'm just being told by the PS that there are some thermal scanners that are going to be deployed based on what we have in inventory to boost the capacity of that instrument.
You want to go, Karen?
So the case definition is an acute onset of a fever and respiratory symptoms, and with a travel history to a place that would have active transmission. So first, you would have to complete the fever. The person did not have a fever. The travel history was to China, but in a place where this was not circulating. Also, we are just outside the incubation period, which is 2 to 10 days normally, but may extend to 14 days. So the person would have left China on the 13th and arrived here on the 14th. So today is the 28th. So we are just outside because they would have left China on the 13th. So we start counting on the 13th, yes? And so we are outside of that period. So persons get ill for other reasons. So UWI did the correct thing and they alerted and they, but at the end of the day, it's not a suspected case and would not make the requirement to send in that sample abroad because we could not send it. They would not receive it from us, even if we tried to send it. Just, you know, we just want to make sure, we want to tell the public this is not it, and we have proof. That's not how it works. And so we would not even be able to send that sample.
So it's a process of risk assessment.
Okay, so it may be a few days to get the result. First of all, we have to transport it to the site that will test. And based on their turnaround time, we will get the result. Pardon me? That's the possibility. PAHO would, I don't know if, do you have a time yet?
Jamaica is very fortunate in having a national influenza center, and PAHO WHO up to the end of last year was doing training with the laboratory and the national laboratory and the national influenza center. So we know that in terms of information systems and capacity, they were up to speed. WHO is expecting that we will be able to send the specific reagents to all of the national influenza centers within approximately 2 weeks, and then the local national influenza centers should be able to conduct the necessary tests locally. We'll also be sending the test and the reagents to CARFA as well. So both the National Influenza Center here in Jamaica and CARFA will be getting those reagents at the same time, and will have the capacity to test.
We do have Dr. Alison Nicholson from Microbiology, Infection Prevention and Control, and Dr. Azinger here. So afterwards, if you want any specific questions regarding how the process takes place in terms of testing, you can consult with them, but they are here.
One quick question. You did say that the patient did not present the case definition for what did the patient present?
I'm sorry.
You did say the patient did not present what you call the case definition.
With the case definition.
What
Yeah.
did the patient actually present?
Yeah. So I understand that you want to get details. We have to respect our patient's privacy. But in this case, the patient did not have a fever over 38, and the patient did not have the respiratory symptoms that are discussed in the case definition.
Sorry, you're not answering the question. Yeah, because the patient's name or where the patient is from. I'm asking what symptoms in this patient is one out of 2 million people in Jamaica present?
Yes, and I am saying to you that we have a case definition, and the patient did not have that case definition. So I think we'd rather not divulge the specific patient's symptoms, sir.
Remember now, it's not a matter of, there are certain protocols that governs the confidentiality around patients and their treatment. The truth of the matter is that you didn't request a name, and I appreciate that. But the attention given to the university hospital since this news broke could create a scenario where that patient could be identified or revealed by some way, shape, or form. We're trying to avoid that. I think what is most important is that the clinical team, and there are several of them in the room, not just Dr. Bruce, he just outlined a few others, and you can have a conversation with them after. What I'm relieved about are two things. Firstly, that the university team acted responsibly by assessing the risk, given the travel history of the particular individual in question. And secondly, of course, that they were able, with their combined capacities, rule out that the coronavirus exists. Now, we're a little disappointed that we made heavy weather of it in the media space so soon, because it has certainly turned the country into almost a panic mode. I understand the issues, I understand the need for concern, but it was important, I think, and it is important now to clarify that this is in fact the case. I want to mention one other thing quickly, and we're going to have to wrap up shortly, but the discussions this morning with the Chinese ambassador and his delegation at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade was a mutually respectful one. It was open, it was transparent, it explored all the possibilities. It recognized the friendship that Jamaica shares with China in a number of areas, both in business, culture, and all the other areas that are good for both countries. Education, we have students there studying the Confucius Center. We have Chinese here teaching our own locals. And the decisions taken around the travel advisory are based on that recognition of our friendship. And I say that to say I do not want this to be interpreted in any way, shape, or form as a hostile position. And indeed, I would go further to encourage us not to use this opportunity or this position currently, and I mean us in a broader sense, to take any position that may be interpreted as being discriminatory. to our Chinese nationals who are currently in Jamaica. The risk is recognized on both sides, and what we're trying to do is to cauterize and to manage that risk. But it makes no definitive statement or no statement at all on the quality of the friendship that we share. And indeed, the ambassador has asked me to extend his own appreciation for the discussions and the positions that we have taken in the interest of all concerned. Okay? Any final question, or you can pick up after? Okay, final means one, but okay, two after that, no more. Yes?
At the time of the Ebola outbreak, there was a quarantine facility being set up at the National Chest Hospital. Can you speak on how equipped and the capacities that can accommodate in the event that the virus gets here?
You want to speak generally on quarantine? Because there are different elements, isolation, different elements. Yeah.
Okay, so all health facilities have some level of isolation, and because of how it is right now, it will be treated at the major hospitals that we have. The facility at National Chest would not be used immediately, but we are revitalizing that matter.
So it would be
All hospitals, because of how it's transmitted, it can be treated at all our hospitals, and there are isolation facilities at our hospitals.
Can I just say something, because I hear the question. I didn't respond to Shamela's inquiry about our health personnel at the ports and equipment and so on. And I think it's a valid concern that is raised, and we appreciate when these things are raised in the public's interest. But let us not forget that Jamaica as a country, with its existing infrastructure, existing personnel, have done what is, I believe, a remarkable job in managing external health risks. We managed to keep yellow fever out, malaria out. I mean, obviously you have a few cases but not to the point where it becomes a crisis. We had the SARS virus. What's the other one called? The MERS virus, which are all comparable, at least in terms of the novel virus, meaning a new virus, to what is now the case. And we have been able to overcome those risks. And that's because we have a fairly resilient system. Our personnel are adequately equipped, or they make themselves so in the case of new threats. And I am sure we will be able to manage this one. Now, I am not saying that there aren't margins of error and that you will always have a risk of an imported case. We have to prepare ourselves to deal with it. But I don't want the population to believe that we are less than adequate, if you will, to both study, understand, and address the issue. And we are making these statements because we think the public must be kept informed, and we have tried to be as transparent as possible in so doing. Okay? Thank you very. Oh, yes, I promise you. No, well, the screening is ongoing. So it's ongoing. Now, these countries have identified a few cases, 1, 2, 3 cases, and they have taken, based on the discussions, either directly or through PAHO, WHO, other organizations that we share, they have taken steps or measures to isolate those cases and to deal with those cases. And so the assessment of the risk associated with those jurisdictions are nowhere as great as in this case where in China, although things are being done, it's the origin and it is also spreading at a much more rapid rate. It does concern us that we have seen a fairly fast pace of spread to other countries, and that speaks to the international nature of China as a country, where people visit and people move around. The up to last night, I believe the virus was picked up in 15 countries, and up to a few days ago, it was in probably 8. So it does suggest that there is a risk, and so that has helped us to conclude on the travel advisory. But at the same time, we do not assess in equal terms the risk in a country where you have 1 or 2 cases, as is the case with China, where the virus originated and where you have many more. All right, I really appreciate the time. Thank you very much, and we will keep in touch.
The date is Tuesday, January 28. This is the news on PBCJ. I am Simone Absalom. A new fleet of 35 vector control vehicles were unveiled and handed over to the Ministry of Health and Wellness on Monday. Prime Minister Andrew Holness and Health and Wellness Minister Dr. Christopher Tufton were at the